week's cut.
Hey everyone, this is episode number 5, machine and hand finish the blade. I'm just chilling in my shop here. You'll hear me have a couple drinks. I'm kind of battling some stuffiness, but here's the blade out of temper. It is the nice straw color that I like. This is going to look really familiar. I clean it up on the machine basically like I rough ground it, but then I take it down to the thickness I want and go up through the different grits of belt. So here I'm starting on a new 36 grit blaze, working on the taper tang first, make sure everything's flat. Nothing new here. Got my trusty red magnet that I always use. So you can see I've touched that up. Hit the other side. Being careful not to overheat. Now on this part, I don't mind if I get the tang or that spine a little warmer. It'll actually help with the strength of the blade, as long as you don't get that cutting edge overheated. So now I'm just working on that grind. With every pass I dip it so that I don't heat that blade too much. Nice clean crisp grind. Cool it off. I don't wear gloves. I want to be able to make sure I don't get too hot. Nice pass. You can tell the sparks are different on a hardened blade. You can even get a peek at some of that hamon. I think we did that before though, when we were taking that clay on, if you watched episode number 4 on this series. Cleaning up. I didn't cut any of this out, so you're going to enjoy it. I did, however, cut out some of the hand sanding. I don't think you want to watch all of that. But I showed you basically how I do it, but I didn't go up through all the grits for you. So you can see kind of some wobbles in there. So I'm going to pay attention as I grind. I'm going to just put pressure where I need it to fix those. And still a little bit of wobble in there. I'm going to take it out of the tip portion. And really how I do this is I take the cutting edge down to the thickness I want, and then I climb up the spine as the last part. So I'm still working a little bit on the edge. As I go out near the tip, I tend to curve it in so it's more of a convex out towards the tip. It adds a little bit of strength. Mike Quisenberry does that, and so I decided if Mike does it, I think I should do it as well. So that's what I do. You don't have such a thin tip. I still get some distal taper in there, but I like to put a little more convex edge on that tip. So here I am on the other side. Same thing, just taking it down to the thickness I want. And a lot of people ask me, what thickness do you want before you hand sand it? Or before you put your secondary bevel or your cutting edge on it. Every knife has a different use. So if this was a chopper, I would leave a thicker edge, maybe the thickness of, I don't know. Sometimes on the heavy choppers, I'm pretty thick. On this one, it's a nice thin slicer, so I take it down quite a bit. Some people take them down to 0, and that's great, but if you're going to do any kind of chopping or anything, you run the risk of having some edge damage. It's kind of a fine line you walk. Same goes with the angle that you put your edge on. Depending on the knife or the use, you're going to have a different angle. So that's something you're just going to have to work out for yourself, what works best. I do a little bit of testing in this to show you. When I get to my final edge thickness, I put an edge on it and then test it on kind of similar stuff that it might be used on before I start doing any hand sanding. All right, still working on it. Getting there. kind of slow going because you want to keep that blade cold. I could have had this done if I didn't care about the heat on it. I tempered it right around 390. So you don't want to go over that temperature, and it's pretty easy to do if you get grinding real hard on it. Alright, we should be getting closer to getting everything cleaned up here. I am drinking a 825 State Stout. Yep, it's a dark beer. Still trying to celebrate St. Patty's Day, so. All right. Just checking where we're at, checking how straight we are. You want to get all the water off that edge because it sometimes creates an optical illusion of an uneven spot. So I always make sure I've got the water off. That's what I was doing there. I think we stayed pretty straight through this one. I've already removed the center line, which actually wasn't center on this, if I remember right. It was 2 lines. But because I'm doing a thin edge. So here I'm just checking both sides where that runs off near the tip. I needed to take this one back a little further just to match. I'll probably check them again once I do this. I don't know what I said there. Didn't like something. I think I'm convexing that edge a little more. It's a little thicker out on the tip. So I can see that I'm off a little, so I'm going to take a little more off that tip there. Don't fry your tip. It's real easy to get too aggressive on that tip. It's super thin. Checking it again. I try to fine tune with this 36 grit belt. Everything up from here on up is more removing scratches than shaping. So I think I've got a curve on this side where the other side is more straight. So I'm just going to work on that top edge, just apply pressure more towards the spine. That looks pretty good. Yep, nice and straight. All right. Gonna check that spine again, see where they come off. Pretty good. I think we're there. I'm gonna check my plunge, make sure they're straight or even. They don't have to be straight, but they do need to be even. I'm gonna thin the edge out just a tiny bit. This is something I've had to work on over the years. A lot of times I have those edges just too thick and they just don't cut well. I have to force myself to get them thinner and thinner and thinner. So getting a little better about it. I'm guessing you that get bored watching this through the whole process can fast forward. But I thought it'd be nice to just show you about how long it takes for me to clean it up on the machine. Alright, now what are we doing? Changing the belt out's my guess. Maybe. Convexing. So now that I've got my arm in your way, that doesn't help, does it? Anyway, I'm just putting it on that where there's no platen behind it so that it does a little rounding on that edge to even bring that cutting edge down further. So I'm convexing it down out on that flat. Hopefully we'll let you guys see a little better here. You can kind of see there what I'm doing. As you bring it closer to the front wheel, it becomes a more abrupt curve on the cutting edge. As you move it back to that by the motor, it rounds a little more evenly. So if you're trying to roll that cutting edge up a little, you want to be closer to that front wheel. If you just want a nice gentle curve, you can be out in the middle or closer up to the drive. Actually, the drive wheel's down low, the top wheel there. So there we have it. That's the 36 grit. Now I, at this point, want to get all the clay out of these holes. So I use this unibit. It's an older unibit. And just drive it up into those. You don't want the helicopter of death, so put the sharp cutting edge facing you so that if it grabs it and spins it, you're just going to get thumped by a spine instead of a sharper edge. It's not sharp yet, but it still will cut if it hits you hard. So you can see it grab on those. There we go. So we've got the clay out of all the holes. Now we can move up in grits. Back to the grinder. Change out the belt. There's a screw there that I used to hold my dust system that no longer exists. All right, we do the same thing, but with a 120 belt, which is what this is. So we went from 36 to 120. And more of the same. Fortunately, this one doesn't take as long. So you won't have to bear with me through such a long time. I also have my heat treat oven going. I've got a blade I've been working on that's a Sanmai wrought iron Sanmai blade that should be kind of fun to do. It's for the triple aught design pattern. So if you hear some beeping or some clicks, that's what that is. It's my oven. Multitasking. That's how I get blades done on time. I don't get blades done on time. I shouldn't say that. That's how I get blades done in a timely manner. Is I can do things like this while I work on knives. All right, what did I miss? More grinding. So what I'm trying to do here is just make sure that we've got all the big scratches from the 36 grit belt out. I'll do the flats, like the tapering of the tang. Now I hit the bevels. And because I convexed it, right now I'm getting the flats up closer to the spine. You're still going to have some big scratches down near the cutting edge because we rolled that, and the flat platen won't catch it. We'll have to get those, just like we put the convex in. We'll have to go up on top of the belt and clean up those rolled edges a little bit. But you can see it cleans it up pretty quick. As you move it back and forth in the light, you're able to see where the scratches are that you need to remove. If you don't do that, your hand sanding is going to be a nightmare. You'll be doing a lot of hand sanding. So the more machine work you can do, the better your hand sanding goes. A problem area is up near that ricasso or choil. So I try to hang the belt over to the right in this case and clean up inside that ricasso, because it's really hard to do when you're using a block and sandpaper by hand. So I pay close attention to that area up there. So just getting it in there. Now I hang it over to the other side, and I'll do the same thing on the other side. Clean it up to 120. In knife making, all these passes, you have the chance of screwing up your nice grinds. That's something that is one of the hardest things, I think, is just getting comfortable with your grinder so that you can do all these passes without messing the blade up. Just think of how many opportunities there are to screw it up. So, a lot of practice. I still screw up blades. So, you can see those lines in there up near the tip. That's what I'll focus on. And I'm doing very light pressure on these. I'm not hogging it off. I really wasn't hogging with the 36, but I was definitely putting more pressure on it than I am now. So I'm just touching those spots in there. A few more that I need to get rid of. And then I'll go up to convex those edges. Or actually, the convex is there. I'm just removing the scratches. And I'm sure my big fat arm is going to be in the way again, even though it looks like I try to make it work. Well, that shows it better. So that's basically what I did with the 36 belt. Just checking for scratches. Same thing on this side. It's a pretty long video. Let me know in the comments if I should have shortened it and just told you this is what I'm doing, continue on. But just checking my edge. Got a little thickness in there, so I'm going to remove a little more. Like I said, I want this to be pretty thin. Now I'm going to go to a gator belt. I love my gators. So these are the 3 grits I go through before hand sanding. I do 36, 120, and then a gator, and I believe this is a 65, which is right around a 400 grit. So it's a number 65 gator. And I have a wire brush that I clean up. I just drag it along that bottom wheel, and it kind of roughs up the abrasives a little, cleans out some of the junk that's in there if I've been using it, and that helps kind of refreshen the belt a little bit. I don't think it works on the blaze belts, but it does work on these gator structured belts. And I didn't think I got it in the video, so I want to show you again. Alright. Get all the little dust off my magnet. That stuff catches on fire. It gets pretty hot, so I clean that off regularly. And on this, I kind of move it back and forth in different angles to get the scratches moving in different ways. I don't want to grind the belt horizontal or the knife horizontally, but I also want to kind of create not just a bunch of straight line scratches. So I look at it and see where I need to focus. This part that I pointed out is what's going to be exposed. The stuff under the handle doesn't matter as much. So really I'm just focusing on those portions. That's also what I'll focus on when I hand sand. So don't worry about the whole handle having scratches. It actually will help to have scratches in the handle portion that's going to be glued, because it'll create a stronger bond with the epoxy. And I make it a habit now of flipping the blade upside down and right side up. I've got to straighten out my platen a little bit. It's getting a little worn, so I need to put it on a surface grinder. All right, same thing on this part. Just hit those bevels. A little more of the same, but with a different belt. There's a big wobble in there if you saw it. I'm going to try to get that out. It's not very much, because you're with the 120 and this belt, you're not removing much material. So a lot of it's more cosmetic when you're looking at it. When you hand sand that, it kind of goes away. But I try to get it as even as possible on the machine. And again, I focus in that plunge because it's really hard to get into with a piece of sandpaper and a block. Need to finish that knife that's hanging up on the wall. It's a nice little fighter. Problem is it's a hidden tang, which always I put off. If it was a full tang, it'd be done by now. It's got a nice amount on it, so I should finish it. Now on the other side, same thing. I feel like I'm being all casual on this one. Too much video. Let me know if you have any questions. You can see that I am not getting the very edge where it's convexed. Still got the 120 scratches in there, but I will do that on top of the belt right now, probably. And I will move it up again. I got Lorian's hatchet up there. I need to get that to him. He's been very, very patient. It's his design. It's also his hatchet. Excuse me. All right, let's get this done. I'm going to pause this recording here after I finish this so I can get the oven squared away. Almost done with the machine finish. And I don't know what I'm doing now. I'm going to sharpen it, so let me pause it after this. So this is where I've gotten the machine finished. I'm going to put a final edge on it so that I can test it. If I'm going to be hand sanding it and putting a hammer on it, I don't want to test after that, so I will put an edge on it. And this is how I put an edge on it. I don't think I show you, well, I'm not to that point yet. I'll show you my final edge, but This is how I put a quick edge on a blade. Oh, never mind. I will do that, but not right now. Right now I'm going to clean the spine up so that I can clean up that jimping that I put on here. So I'm just going to take the 120. It's a used 120 belt. Clean that spine up a little. Careful on that tip. You don't burn it off. So you can sort of see where the jimping is. I'm just getting rid of that center score line so that I can have a nice flush, flat surface to square up the jimping. And I will stop it before I go to the jimping. And I should knock the corners off here also. Not where the handle's going to go, because you don't want a corner knocked off there. But normally I'll take those sharp edges off. Yeah, so that's sharp. So I'm just going to stay in front of the jimping, so I'm not in the handle, and I'm just going to 45 it off. Boom. And then the other side. I go in the house every night with just cuts all over my fingers, and it's usually from those edges. All right, I am back. So here's the blade. I'm going to put it in my vise so that I can clean up that jimping on the spine. You're unable to do this when you fully harden a blade. So if I've got a stainless blade, I've got to have this jimping all cleaned up and ready to go before heat treating, because this is a differential heat treat. That spine is still soft enough to hit it with the file, so I'm able to clean it up. So you can see I rounded around those corners. Make sure I keep it in a straight line, otherwise you get a bunch of weird looking jimping. This is a checkering file from, I believe, Brownells for gun stocks. Works really well. You got to be careful. Also, if you don't go in a straight line, you'll ping those little teeth off. See if you can see. You can kind of get a good look at it. I'm not a big jimping fan. They do serve a purpose, but if you use it for anything that's kind of mucky. So I didn't show you the sharpening, so I will show you that on the final one, but I have put an edge on this. I've just got a piece of paper towel roll. It's a good way to show your... The reason I was looking at the blade there is I actually hit the angle iron with it, but all's good, no chipping. So I put it the other way, which is a smarter way to do it. Didn't look like I cut it, but I did. Let's see what we do here. So it's cutting nice. There's the other piece. You can see I've chopped off the other side. Now I'm going to cut one of the other corners off. I wish it would stay there. That would be the ultimate test, is if the piece stayed there. But it's cutting well, as you can see. So I think that's it. Good test. Check the edge. Obviously there would be no damage to the edge with something like this. But I'm happy with the geometry. Now I'm knocking that edge off so I don't cut myself when I hand sand it. So I just do a really light touch. Flatten that out so it's not sharp anymore. And then when I put the bevel back on, the geometry will be the same. Just do a little secondary bevel. Still a sharp little bit there, so clean that up. Make sure it's all the same thickness, which is actually really thin at this point, but not thin enough to slice me if I run my finger across it while I'm hand sanding. All right, let's get to the hand sanding table. I've made this angle iron piece that sticks out with a piece of micarta on top that's flexible. A lot of people get fancy on this. I haven't done that yet. I need to. Some people thread the angle iron so that a screw comes up through the bottom and can push that micarta up. When you have a tapered tang, a lot of times that tip hangs quite a ways off the micarta. So you need to push that micarta up to get support under that blade on the bottom side. I just use 2 simple clamps. Lay it down. So make sure the tip's not sticking off too far that you're going to stab yourself. Go ahead and clamp it down. Get it where I want it. That tips out a little bit, but not far enough that it's going to hurt me. And then put the other clamp on. The reason I do one handle up, one handle down is so they don't get in the way of each other when you're trying to tighten them. Genius. All right, see how there's flex in there? There's room for that micarta to come up. So what I do is I get an 1/8 inch drill bit, and I just slide it between that angle iron and the micarta. I just turn on my bright light up above. That helps me see scratches. So I've got a spotlight shining straight down. So I lift up that micarta, slide that drill bit underneath it so that it's not able to flex anymore. Nice and tight. Save you a lot of time when you get that solid backing. You're not fighting the flex of the blade. My beautiful chair that's seen way too much use. I need to reupholster it. Windex. I use Windex as a cutting fluid, I guess, for lack of a better term. Some people use Simple Green. I started with Windex, so I just use Windex. A lot of people have changed over to Simple Green. These are my sanding blocks. They're all just micarta blocks. One's got a slightly rounded edge when I do a 10-inch wheel hollow grind. That one's flat, just on my small one. I haven't rounded the others. The stuff that's on, so one side is just pure micarta flat. The other side is a thing you can get at Home Depot or other big box stores. It's you put it under the legs of your chairs and couches so that it doesn't dig into your floors. So it's kind of a really dense material. All right, so I use my big block to cut my blocks to size. Right now I'm going to use this medium block. My favorite block is that little one. I use it probably 90% of the time. Spray a little bit of Windex on it. And then I'm going to go across the scratches on the bevels. And I'm just using the flat, hard side. The sandpaper I'm using right now is 220. That's what I start with. I don't go through this whole thing. This takes up to an hour plus going through the different grits. You have to remember that you're not actually removing scratches. You're removing all the material around the scratch. And you can't just focus right where the scratch is, otherwise you'll have big grooves. I shouldn't say big. You're doing this by hand, so you're not creating big grooves, but you will be able to see wobbles in the blade flats if you just focus right where the scratches are. You can see that hamon peeking through a little bit. And you just work it. The reason I use a solid block is because I don't want to roll that top edge. It looks sloppy if you end up with a round grind line. So you just keep it flat on that flat. Don't get rid of that little V you see up on top of the spine. You want a nice crisp line. So Nick Wheeler is the master hand sanding guru. If you want to learn how to properly hand sand to perfection, take a look at his videos, and he'll help you a lot more than I will. I do what I call a dirty hamon. I think I coined that phrase. I'm not 100% positive, but it came into my brain, and I don't think I've seen anyone else use it early on. Now people are using it, but so Nick Wheeler does a high polish hamon on most of his blades, So does Mike Quisenberry and all those guys. Those are pretty labor intensive, and they disappear with very little use. They're very subtle, actually. You get a lot of the Ashi white fine hamon that you have to kind of move in the light to see it. You get to see it kind of like that chatoyance that you get in some of the woods. Mine is a very bold, in your face, dirty hamon. So I don't take my grits up high as they do. And it's purely aesthetic on a blade this size. The hamon's a hamon. You've got a differential heat treat where the spine is soft and the edge is hard. That works great for choppers and big blades where you need the flexibility in the spine, but you want a hardened edge that will hold a sharp edge. If you have soft steel, it'll just roll and won't cut well. So, or it'll cut well for a very short time, but then it just dulls. So we've got a hardened edge and a soft spine. On a blade this size, you don't need that soft spine. It's more cosmetic. But it's definitely beautiful, and I think it's kind of my niche. I love doing hamons. 90% of my blades have hamons on them. So, again, just working the lines out. You can easily see because the lines from the grinder are going the opposite direction. As you sand this direction, you can see all those lines going the other way that you need to get rid of. Now I'm going to change over to the small block. And you can see it's pretty finger intensive. Your hands get tired. I have Matt Lane, the kid. I call him a kid. He's a veteran, 30 some odd years. I don't know exactly how old he is. I should. He comes in the shop and helps me a lot with this hand sanding. But you can see a few of those little 4 scratches right there in the middle. The hamon. And also down close to the edge, you can see some scratches that need to be removed. So that's where I'll focus, doing long sanding, not just right in that spot, but I will kind of focus the attention there. So I'm pointing those 4 scratches out. And I just work them out. This is why I have a TV in my shop. I actually get a little flack. Up, looking at the camera here, up in the upper left corner, there's a TV there. I'll watch informational movies, YouTube, how-tos. It's a good way to pass the time. This is kind of brain dead work. So, plus it's my shop, so I can do what I want in it. Just cleaning it up. And I'm not going to give you all my secrets on this. I know that there are a few makers that I've talked to that think information is too readily available and we're too open about sharing how we do things. I've had a lot of people help me in this endeavor of knife making, and so I like to pass things on. But I don't want to do that just without work. Some people just constantly ask, how do you do this? How do you do this? How do you do this? Without trying. And I would rather you try it yourself. So I've moved the camera around here kind of so you can see a little different angle. I've got that all cleaned up with the 220 grit. Now I'm going to work on the flats. Now this is a problem that I actually run into quite frequently. If you remember when I ground this and did the machine finish on this, I put the blade tip up or tip down, so the lines are going lengthwise on this. That's also how I'm going to hand sand them. So it's much harder to see those lines disappear, or the ones that stand out, because I'm going the same direction that the machine finish went. So you have to pay close attention to the lines when you do this portion, because those, when you etch in ferric chloride, which we'll do a little later, when you etch that hamon out, those lines show up really strong, the scratches. So you have to focus on it. Another thing that happens here, especially because I'm using this small block, if you don't keep it dead flat, you'll roll that edge and run into the problem we talked about before, where you're rolling that edge on top and it is no longer a crisp line where your grind is, and it just doesn't look very good. So you got to make sure you keep it flat. It takes a little bit of practice. I will use the bigger block here in a minute, I'm sure. Using the small block here is just a way that I make sure I get those lines out from that machine finish with a higher grit. So I do this just to make sure that's all clean, and then I'll go to a bigger block that'll make it so it's easier to keep flat, and I keep a portion of the block on that part by the pins so that it can't roll down over that edge and flatten that. So I'm not really in the camera there, I don't know what I'm showing you. This is the medium block. Another bit of 220. And I'll kind of go over onto that little nub, the ricasso by that choil. So this makes sure that I just stand flat, and I want to get whatever's going to be exposed not under the handle, so I'm trying to focus on that portion down below right there. So that's where we're focusing. And if you can kind of catch a different angle, maybe not straight tip to butt, maybe you go 45 or a 22 degree angle, that'll help you find those scratches that will show up during the etch. Get a close look at it. Still some scratches down in there. So again, I'll hit it some more. And you can actually take the machine finish even better, higher than I did, and it'll save a little bit of time on this, but I don't do that. The 45 gator belt is actually my favorite. For some reason, I feel it works a lot better than even the 65. So sometimes I'll skip. Excuse me. It's my bedtime. Sometimes I'll skip the 65 and just go do the 45. I was pointing out that there's kind of a line on that corner. I can see some of those scratches, so I'm just going to focus there and get rid of those. You can actually put a little more pressure on that spine edge, and it'll help get rid of that sharp corner. Just taking a good look at it. I think we've got it. That's it for the hand finish. So you do the same thing on the other side. You take it up to 320 and then 600. And once you've got a nice clean 600, you go to your logo etch, which I will do in the next video. Thanks, everyone.